are you guys?
Hi, I'm Cecilia.
Nice to meet you.
Well,
Nice to meet you.
hi.
Is it Megan or Megan?
It's Megan, whatever.
Megan and Joey. Great to
Mhm.
meet you both.
You too. We were just talking about how much we love your headshots.
Yeah.
Well, we love what you guys are doing, and thank you so much for understanding our series and for the support.
Yeah.
It's
So let me.
incredible to see how it's perceived and that what we try to communicate has been understood. So thank you both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Megan wrote a really awesome review. We both like. I don't. I devoured it in like a day, which was probably really hard for my psyche. So, but yeah, I think it's incredibly well made, and it's very important. So thank you for taking the time
Yeah.
to talk to us.
Thanks for doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I
I'm
was just going to say that's interesting to hear you talk about your psyche. We've just been discussing the impact it had on both the women in the series, India and the other women, to have to relive and talk about what happened in NXIVM, and to us and the production team and all the editors working on it.
Mhm.
So it was a very complicated story to tell.
Yeah.
We can get more into that later, but
Yeah, I sort of wanted to ask both of you, just generally speaking, like how soon did you talk to India? Like, did you approach her? Was she looking for an outlet to, talk about her story? How did you sort of become involved and get the ball rolling on it?
our production was up and running with the other former members who speak out, Tabby, Deb, Naomi, and Kelly. And we were filming at the courthouse and met India there. And she was coming out of, it hadn't been so long since she was able to leave NXIVM. She went through deprogramming. There was a 9-month process of collaborating with the FBI. She was really at the forefront of helping the prosecution to convict Keith Raniere. So she was at a period where she was in her own healing process and really trying to understand what had happened to her, what had happened to her brain. So we happened to meet her at that point when she was considering getting her voice back and taking her story back into her own hands. And I think she saw us as a women-driven production, telling the stories of women by women. And she and her mom also had a prior relationship to our incredible female production executive at Starz, and things aligned for her to feel safe with our production and join Seduced.
Yeah.
Joey and I talked about how Seduced is very clear in how India was brought into NXIVM. Like you break it down step by step.
Yeah.
And one thing that I kept thinking about was was Keith Raniere conscious of this step by step of how to do these things? Do you think all cult leaders know this in some way, or did he know what he was doing? Did he study cult leaders? I guess I just wanted to know, like, how do you know how to do this to people?
I mean, the crimes that he was ultimately convicted of were things that he had been doing and practicing since the 90s. There were women who had come forward with accusations and charges of molestation and of underage rape. So he had managed to clear himself of these charges, but he had been a predator for a long time. And he was able to construct this organization, this system built around self-help courses, but actually use it ultimately as a system to subjugate women and deliver sex slaves to him.
I sort of wanted to ask, because something that really struck me about this was you brought in so many different experts on cults. I enjoyed how there wasn't just one perspective. There was many perspectives. Can you sort of talk to us, excuse me, I'm so used to doing this by myself.
Me too.
Sort of talk to us about, getting so many perspectives and why that is important with such a topic like this?
Well, there's a lot of different aspects to cult studies, cultic studies. Dr. Yanya Lalich is a sociologist. Different experts, and since I can talk more about that, bring different fields of study, different understandings of the material. And we felt like having the multitude of voices really brings context, legitimacy, well-researched, basis of understanding to this material that was like, actually took some time to decipher. You watch an hour-long word salad and to know that, oh, that one line, that one moment is that nugget where it all really comes to, like, that's the moment you have to pay attention to. Yeah. That's the moment where the indoctrination really manifests itself. So, we needed those experts to keep shining light on what is actually happening. So the audience is not lost as the members are in this just psychobabble.
And I sort of really enjoyed that it was like every time a new expert was introduced, I feel like as an audience member and as a viewer, it sort of builds up another defense to every crazy piece of bullshit that Keith Raniere has thrown out there. Is like, okay, this is a person who knows what they're talking about. It sort of reinforces what the doc does so well, is just that if there was just maybe one expert talking about it, there might be a critic be like, oh no, they don't know what they're talking about. But every single different perspective, I think, is so important. So I love that is an aspect of the whole series.
I think whenever you talk about cults, people's first comment is, well, how could they have been drawn in? Or that could never happen to me. And those women sitting in those rooms listening to Nancy Salzman or Keith, if they had had the benefit of any one of those experts at any time to bring that context of, this is what's actually happening to your brain, and this is the very deliberate process of how they are transforming your thoughts, they wouldn't have been indoctrinated so deeply. But they didn't have that. And the NXIVM recruiting was so skilled at making people believe that they were offering them what they needed to succeed in their lives or their careers or get the mentorship they were seeking. So we also think those experts are the ones who give the context and the perspective to how those women in those rooms didn't understand or didn't know how their brains were being worked on.
So this is coming out, Seduced is coming out just as The Vow has ended on HBO. And I was wondering, and well, Joey and I were both wondering, how much did you guys know about The Vow while you were filming this? And once you knew about it, did you feel like you had to change things or kind of find out what they were doing to avoid repetitiveness?
Inbal, do you want to start?
Well, Cecilia can talk about how the project originated, but we didn't know there was another multi-part series going on, and that HBO has taken that on when we started. And by the time we had found out about it, we were already going full steam ahead. We were already committed to these members to tell their stories. We felt indebted to tell their stories. And so we just kept our own lane. It's obviously, I think it would have been a different conversation had we known, do we want to take on 2 years of work going against another, bigger funded project? I don't know what that conversation would be, but it was already done, and we just kept in our own lane and tried to do the best series we can deliver. There were 17,000 members reportedly in NXIVM, so there's the 17,000 stories. Obviously, there's much smaller number of women that were in DOS, but there was manipulation and coercion on all levels. This was like a collateral damage. So on all levels of this organization, there was some kind of trauma that's worth looking at. And so we just thought there's enough stories to tell, and we have our own point of view. And so we didn't really know what they were doing. We knew they were able to film during in 2017, 2018, before we started, while the organization was actually coming apart. So they had definitely that angle and advantage perhaps. But you know, our angle was different, and we just did our own thing. And we actually locked picture before the vow even started airing. So while we are fascinated by it and have watched it, couldn't have influenced our show because it was just done and delivered by then. And then it was really Starz' decision of when to release it. So that was at that point out of our hands.
And actually, they're both so different. It's so interesting that it is sort of, you know, we're talking about the same organization, a lot of the same people, but it feels so so incredibly different in its approach. I love that yours is very matter of fact, and how Megan said earlier that it does just really break it down. And you know, going back to what Cecilia said, like how people assume, you know, you don't think that you're going to get involved in something like this. I think I actually texted Megan when I first started watching, or, you know, first started going into both shows, that I was just like, no, that would have never happened to me. Like, I think I know better. And I feel like that, like, sort of pseudo judgment of any people that's involved in the documentary is completely blown away by the time that we finish your show. Sorry.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
I mean,
because, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just that I think we, you know, with India and the other women in the story, we realized we had this lens through them that we could just follow to really see how this cult worked from start to finish. You know, India's really our through line, and I think through her you get to see all the complicated ways of how NXIVM operated and what happened once you walk through those doors. But you know, the women are really at the heart of our story. And the production too. You know, all of our key departments are led by women. We had lots of shoot days when our crew was 14 women. I mean, we also had incredible guys who joined us. But I think that created a safe space on the set. And that was, you know, something that it's hard for these women to open up. It's hard to admit you were in a cult, and one that's called a sex cult. And we really did want to create a very safe space, and one that felt supportive for them. And you know, honoring their stories was really what inspired us and drove us.
And that wasn't an easy task. We realized early on that the way they were traumatized and triggered by retelling their stories was actually something that we were not equipped to handle ourselves. So we actually set up counseling services. We set up a fund in collaboration with an anti-cult group called FACT organization, and to provide counseling services for our subjects before, during, and after filming. And we keep supporting them through the release. And this is something that rarely gets talked about, but our own production and editing team were exposed to this material. And I would walk down our little post facility and hear people screaming at their monitors, like, what the fuck? Did he just say that? Excuse my language. You know, in our weekly team meetings, that this was actually hard on our loggers and on our editing team, that to be exposed to this kind of intense brainwashing material and to these really difficult stories. And so we extended and provided the same counseling services to anybody on the team who needed it. And, you know, personally, I've been on true crime shows. I worked as an editor on other shows that have not done that. And I've seen how it can be really difficult on people working in this field. to handle long exposure to this material.
And with our subjects, you know, India obviously was just incredibly courageous and understood that no matter how hard this was going to be, her story could educate and help others. And same with all the women in our show. But we had people like beautiful Naomi, who was second generation, meaning she was born into a cult, a very destructive one called the Children of God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's left with a lot of scars, you know, a lot of trauma from that. She turned to NXIVM because she believed that Jeunesse, specifically the women's group, could offer her, you know, a community that would help her heal. So, you know, her trauma and her shame over falling for another group is, you know, is great. I mean, she's really brave. And we, you know, we just really wanted to investigate, how did NXIVM get to people like that? What was she being told that would make her, instead of, you know, subjugation? You know, we wanted to ask questions like, what were those readiness drills about? What were they getting ready for? You know, we really wanted to take a deep dive into what information was being disseminated and how it was working on the brains of the people in NXIVM.
Yeah. So I guess you sort of led me into the next question that I had specifically with India. I was really shocked that when she's retelling these stories and she's physically in the space where she relived that, I'm sort of like her bravery sort of like took my breath away, just being able to be in that specific space. And I was wondering what it's like for both of you as a director and a producer, what it's sort of like to guide someone through that when the trauma is so like physically close.
I mean, I think our opening scene of episode 3 really shows on camera the trauma that she was experiencing when she, you know, she broke down there thinking about what her life might have been, but then saying maybe this had to happen so that I would see that there is evil like this in a world, and maybe I can save the daughter I might have one day so she won't have to go through this. It was very triggering, but you know, India wanted to face all of that. When we first talked to her, we said, you know, how are you doing? And she said, well, I'm trying to actually figure out the difference between what I thought was happening and what was actually happening. So we thought, if she's willing to take us on that journey and take the audience through her process of trying to understand what happened there and what happened to her brain, you know, that's a brave and fascinating journey and a through line for a documentary. But I, you know, I think it was hard and healing for her at the same time. I think knowing that this story will, you know, will educate others and help others see some of those red flags where you least expect them has also given her a lot of strength.
One of the things that has been nagging me about the whole situation is that the Bronfmans sisters kept funding this, like, because I mean, I think they even said that like they didn't make money, you know, like the NXIVM didn't really make money, but the Bronfmans just kept, you know, helping along. What do you think they got out of this? Why do you think they kept, you know, like basically assisting Keith with this?
We did not get to interview Claire.
Yeah.
She's under house arrest and can't speak to media. Her sister.
Well, she's in prison now. She was under house arrest.
Was under house arrest when we were filming. Her sister is in Europe and has not been indicted, not yet anyway. You know, we definitely, our experts have some thoughts about what was going on there. They cite a specific talent that Keith Raniere had with children of famous people. So he had a special, let's call it quote unquote, talent to target people like India and like Emiliana Salinas or Claire Bronfman, to tell them, you need to get out of the shadow of your famous, successful parents and make your own identity, your own world. And so I think they felt like it's my own personal opinion, that they got a feeling like they accomplished something on their own outside of their family. That was, obviously we can tell that I could tell they got different treatment. I mean, those people that were, sort of VIPs and highly desirable, they were treated differently than your common, Tabby or Deb or Naomi coming into this. So they were specifically micro-targeted, very skillfully recruited. They were spared some of the information and the most horrific abuse, and they were made to feel important. They were put on the executive board or given like fancy titles or responsibilities within the organization to feel like they were really part of a successful international company.
But, the Bronfmans, not only did they lend this legitimacy and NXIVM used their name to promote it, and not only did they fund, the programs, but they also funded a years-long systematic silencing, threatening, and abuse of journalists and of anyone who tried to leave the cult. I mean, that was one of Keith's main uses of their funds, was with these harassment suits and really legal terrorization of anyone who tried to speak out about NXIVM or defect. So it was more than just, the Bronfman money behind the cult. It was, it was the silencing of any voices of dissent.
And the litigious terrorism that it funded.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing I've been thinking about is that, India speaks a lot about how the friendships, she valued the friendships so much in the cult. And it seems like that is a thing that kept people, other than being silenced and being scared to leave, also the friendships seem to be something. And do you think that the friendships made it harder for people to escape, that they actually really like these people? I feel like there's a loneliness maybe to some people who join it, that they want that camaraderie. And I just find it fascinating that they want to stay for the people, and some of these people are hurting them.
I think the friendships, they did form real bonds. I mean, a lot of people didn't meet Keith Raniere for 3 or 4 years. He was deep in the background while people were building a sense of community and very close friendships, and gradually becoming indoctrinated into a different way of thinking. But the friendships were real, and that definitely made it harder to leave, as well as the predatory alienation with the way the coaches would tell India, you're too dependent on your mother, you're never going to be successful until you separate from her. And they were gradually separating everybody from their loved ones and their previous lives. So all they had was these friend groups within NXIVM. So that was one of the ways that people were entrapped or imprisoned, or that made it so hard to leave. When you've given up the rest of your life, it's very scary when there's no support system to go back to.
Yeah.
And the sorority is the extreme of that, because you're in a little pod or group with your best girlfriends. And of course, you're bonded by this very intense experiences that you share, like being branded together or sharing your very deepest secrets to each other, taking naked photos together. So of course you think these are your family, your group for life, your sisters for life. But it was really a way to police each other, and it's not different than sex trafficking rings. Of how they manipulated people with these women to police each other and keep them in check.
Yeah.
But I think India, it took her a long time to understand, all of this. She thought taking naked photos or having naked photos sent to Keith was about conquering her fears and her inhibitions about her body, and that it would make her braver, more stronger, capable, a better person. I mean, that's how insidious and devious their manipulation was. He wanted to look at their naked bodies, but he made them believe that it was for their own good. That's the degree of the deception that he was capable of. So India and the other women in our show were having a lot of these realizations as they were talking to us. You know, they haven't been given forums to explore a lot of this out loud. So, you know, we're very honored by being able to create this space where you can come to terms with horrific abuse like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the moments where we get to hear, you know, the women say, you know, more than once we get to hear them say that you're like, oh no, it's something about you. It's nothing perverted. It's nothing like he's not getting off on it, stuff like that. Oh, just the mere suggestion of that is incredibly unsettling, and it puts so much weight on each individual woman who has to go through it. It's really heartbreaking to watch. I sort of wanted to ask, we see India and Catherine separated for most of the whole series, and then they are together at the very end. I think it's a very, I think it's a moment. Yeah, you get to see them together. It's sort of like a really rousing moment. I know, like I cheered a little bit when I saw them together. I've never seen them together really since. I mean, is that sort of just a choice to have India tell everything on her own, and then we get this really big rush when we see them together? I was sort of really curious about that choice there.
Inbal, do you want to start?
I mean, in its essence, they started and how they got into this together. And initially, Catherine was taken in more, and then India was then taken in more, and then Catherine leaves, and India gets sucked deeper in. And you know, you see them briefly in episode 1 as they visit India's grandmother in Belgrade, as they're still trying to untangle and come to terms with what happened and fix and heal their relationship. So there is a moment where you see them coming to grips with what just had happened. But yes, by the end, we did feel like this needed a resolution for them to, and this was real. This is really what happened. The more they spoke about this together on camera, the more the healing could happen. And there were things they talked to each other that they have never shared before.
Wait, Inbal, you said the more they spoke together on camera, do you mean separately in their interviews, that the more they were processing? I mean, I think our series does follow what was happening. I mean, that cult really pried them apart. They didn't have a relationship, and they've been very slowly rebuilding it. And, you know, they've had good days and bad days, and which we were aware of. Now they're together, you know, they're happy, but NXIVM made India feel that her mother was, you know, that her mother didn't have her best interests at heart. And, you know, Catherine couldn't get through to India. It wasn't easy for them to heal. So that the final episode of our series shows them, you know, in their fight for each other, you know, to re-find each other. And you know, it's ongoing too. I mean, they're both just incredible women, incredibly brave, open. I mean, there's no mama bear in the world like Catherine Oxenberg. You know, in India, her idealism, her purity, her trust in people are what made her so vulnerable. You know, she was deeply under the influence of one of the most, you know, destructive, dangerous, manipulative predators in the world. You know, she got out, she's healing, she's refinding her mom, and we feel like, you know, our series takes the viewers hopefully on that journey with them.
There's a pivotal moment in episode 4 where India speaks to her mom's lawyer and goes back to a conversation that they had, you know, a year prior, as she was starting to wake up. And you see in real time how she finally comes to grips with her mother's role and gaining appreciation for it and kind of releasing some of the anger that she had over the exposure. And I mean, I think when you watch the whole series, you really see the moment that Catherine makes that decision to speak publicly. I mean, that's a harrowing decision for a mother to make. As a mother, I don't know if I could do the same thing, risk my daughter never talking to me and hating me in order to bring a cult down. Like most mothers to members in NXIVM did not do that. All of them, in fact, except for Catherine. So I think that was like a fascinating moment to unpack and understand, and for India to finally come to terms with and appreciate. And that's something she didn't quite have when we started.
Well, there's also that realization that Catherine, releases all of this. She goes on this media blitz to save her from prison too, in a sense. Like, that was really an amazing moment where you're like, realizing that she's not just doing this to save her. She's doing this to save her and to save her post out of the, like, it was really smart and just really interesting.
Everybody wants to know, what was the moment? When did she wake up? I don't think there's a moment. I mean, there's not a moment when you realize that the last 7 years of your life weren't what you thought they were. It's a very gradual peeling back of the layers. And I think one of the moments for India was when she heard Keith's voice on that hard drive that she had taken from Alice and Max, actually dictating all the terms of DOS, describing what it was, how he wanted his initials in the brand. And I think that was part of her awakening, the extent of the lies she had been told, that Keith Raniere had nothing to do with DOS. But I hope Seduced educates people somewhat on how there's not a moment when you wake up. It's a very difficult process to undo that kind of indoctrination.
And then some people never wake up, because I know at the end that was one of the most chilling endings, when we see
scared me.
The people dancing below his jail cell. Like, tell me a little bit about that. Did you ever worry that this doc is going to give Keith new followers or new attention? And like, did you come in contact with anybody who still believes he's, innocent and everything he was doing is justified?
Oh, I don't think our series is going to provide Keith with more followers. No. That would be a stretch. If anything, maybe it will help wake some people up in this group and other groups to seeing what this was really about. But go ahead, Cecilia.
No, exactly. But we did have a few brushes with his loyalists. I mean, it's very chilling. We encountered them at the courtroom. There was a group of people sitting in a certain section who were loyal to Keith. And, when you would even walk by them, the kind of, I don't know how to describe it, just the hatred and the wall of not wanting to even make eye contact with people who they understood to be not on Keith's side. It's scary. And I think it was scary for people to come forward in this film and the other documentaries because of a fear of retaliation from those loyalists. They've been very powerful, especially in Mexico, also in our country. There are a lot of people in positions of power and a lot of money behind it. So they are definitely still out there. Keith doesn't have any remorse. He's trying to get the charges dropped now. I think people double down when they've been in something like this, even when, he's been convicted and imprisoned for sex trafficking, for 7 federal charges, but it's almost easier to stay with it than admit you were that wrong. So I guess maybe that's where the loyalists are coming from.
It's really disturbing to sort of, after episode 4 is done, and then if a viewer goes back and watches some of those like lighthearted, like V-Week footage, it sort of is really, it's really disturbing. Just even like small interactions between people, you know, the cheering of each other on, it sort of makes everything like really, really sinister. So it's I feel like it's gonna open up a lot of eyes, hopefully. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that we're proud of is having the you know, diversity of the group of former members who came forward to tell their stories. You know, Tabby is somebody who was working for Allison Mack. She couldn't afford those $3,000 and $5,000 courses, so you know, initially she was told she had to take the courses if she wanted to work for Allison, but she would be able to work in exchange for the courses. So that's already, you know, forced labor. They were forcing her to work for the cult. You know, and then once she got through the first level, they said, well, you really need to go on to the second level if you want to make breakthroughs, but you know, these you have to pay for. She ended up, you know, I think $70,000 in debt. And they just wanted people who could work for the cult, support the cult, and bring money to, you know, into the cult. So that's Tabby's story, all the way to someone like Kelly, who had an influential network in Orange County of people that they wanted. You know, they sought out people of influence, you know, and Naomi and Ashley and Deborah, they all have a range of stories. And I think through all of them, along with India, you get a sense of how far the reach of you know, NXIVM went, and how they could attract almost anyone, and how they exploited or what they were seeking from each person they brought in.
Wow. I think that's really all we have for you. Is there anything else you wanted to add or ask, Megan?
No, this was such an amazing conversation. And,
Yeah.
We really, I mean, we enjoyed your docuseries as much as you can enjoy something that's, you know, so dark, but you guys did a great job on it. And
yeah, it's so well made. We've been
really well done
about it. Yeah, we've been talking. That's sort of all we've been talking about in the last like week when we've been watching it. So
we talked about it for 15 minutes, just straight talking about it, like not even talking about our own lives.
Yeah, we're just like, all right, we're gonna get on the phone. We're just gonna, and we didn't even plan it. We just like got on the phone and we're like, let's talk about Seduced. Like that's all we've been. We are just both really big fans of it. So thank you so much for your generosity.
I would love to give a shout out to, you know, just our amazing partner, executive producers, Daniel Voll and Alexander Milchan, and also to our amazing animation team. I mean, it's hard to talk about the series without mentioning the graphics and animation created by Liz Kelly. You know, we're documentary makers and lovers, and India kind of got the bug also, and we would like binge on things over the weekend and text each other. And I think it was her first, and then Cecilia that watched Miss Americana, and then I was like, okay, what's that? Oh, what are you all raving about? And so I watched it too. And then we saw this little sequence that they had, I think maybe just a handful or less of courtroom sketches that were like just so different and interesting of Taylor Swift in court. And we got in touch with that artist, Elise Kelly, and she brought on her team, and she just brought on a whole nother layer of visual experience of things we, you know, didn't have photos or footage for. Those often were the things that were done behind closed doors. And so important moments, you know, turning points and narrative landmarks of India's traumatic journey. And she found a way to visualize it in a way that was emotive and not exploitative. So even when you see the naked women, like it's not like animated porn. It's just really I think a manifestation of the deep emotional trauma that's behind what you see. I'm just in complete awe of her artistry, and it was an amazing collaboration with Elise and her team.
Yeah, just even the colors of those, now that I'm thinking about them, like sort of like reds and like dark purples, sort of like a bruised quality to it, sort of.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Like it really, it felt like since those were included, it feels like nothing is missing. It sort of really plugs the holes in, you know, those really, really emotional, dark moments that we don't have, like you said, we don't have footage for. Yeah.
Every color choice is intentional and
Yeah.
really big collaborative teamwork with, you know, us designing the frames together and talking about the emotional layers behind each scene and experience that she was tasked to visualize using these graphics and animation. Do you want to add something, Cecilia?
You said it even better. I was just going to say, yeah, we worked as hard on that as on any aspect of the storytelling or filming or editing or, you know, we just brought really everything we had to every aspect of the storytelling. You know, we really wanted to make it as impactful and resonant and clear as we could. And, you know, for us, working so hard, you know, 24/7 for a year and a half and then putting it out there and to see, you know, your story, it was just, it made us feel like, okay, we did our job right. You know, we're just grateful. You don't know how people will respond, but this really meant a lot to us. And yeah, in every department from animation to, I mean, my editing, my partner, you, Inbal, there's just no better editing storyteller to me in the world who can put the pieces of a story together in a way that take you deep inside and that resonate and that educate you. I feel so lucky to have Inbal as a filmmaking partner.
We'll have to cut out all our gushing.
Oh,
No, I'm leaving it in there.
I mean, our DP, Arlene Nelson, you know, everybody just brought the right, helped create this atmosphere where we could tell the story well. Her doc on Paris Hilton just came out. She shot I Am Paris, you know, which is another documentary that goes way deeper than you think it's going to. And she was our lead DP. Everybody who worked on this project was just so talented. I mean, did you guys like the music? Daniel Lessner's score, so evocative, so beautiful, kind of taking you into a different world, but really underscoring what happens.
And then leading the team through this emotional roller coaster and then into a pandemic. I mean, we were lucky that we were mostly in the can and like in later stages of editing when mid-March came along. But, you know, Cecilia led everybody to bring their A game and try to communicate, push themselves really as much as we could to collaborate remotely and to try to finish this together and support each other through the hardships that the pandemic presented, you know, to everybody's life and still be committed to doing justice to the story and to honor each and every woman who sat in the chair for us and who shared her painful story with us, and to, you know, get it in the air with like remote mix sessions and color correction sessions with masks on. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah.
As it is for everybody now, but it was really strange to go from very collaborative, close team, you know, work in an office together to all of us siloed, you know, secluded in our homes, trying to keep that teamwork going. So yeah, we're just so delighted that it's actually on the air right now.
And also just thinking about Catherine in India for a moment, I mean, having India who's trying to process what happened to her. And then on the other hand, having Catherine, who's one of the most educated people about coercive control and how indoctrination works. It was pretty incredible to have both of those, you know, someone on the search and someone who really is an authority, and watch them come back together and re-find each other. They're, you know, just so grateful to have had them. And Also, I don't know if you've seen our website. Naomi and Tabby designed a website, seduceddocumentary.com, which offers resources for survivors. And it tells all the stories of all the women in the film. There's a questionnaire. How do you know if you're in a cult?
Wow.
Yeah, so we just launched it. Can't wait for you to see it.
Yeah, we'll link that in. Yeah, we'll link that in with yeah, that sounds really cool. Wow.
Thank you. It's modeled after our bravemissworld.com website that we've done
Okay.
after our last documentary, and had 10 million, over 10 million users, and a huge over 1,000 curated testimonials of rape survivors and family members of rape survivors. And so I think that was an inspiration to do something similar on this and really do an outreach component to this series.
Yeah. Oof. Wow. Yeah, I think it's really awesome that this doc sort of has both sides, like you were saying, they sort of come together. Like we have this amazing, beautifully articulate woman, Catherine, who's so dedicated. She's so calm too. Like she's so headstrong, and she she's obviously very, very emotional about it, but she keeps her cool a lot, and she's able to really hunt passionately for her daughter. And then we have the other side with India being brave enough to tell her story. It's sort of like this really like unique thing that Seduced gets to do, where it comes together and sort of, I don't know how to say it, like sort of comes together and then it moves forward from there, so everyone can sort of start healing from it.
I mean, one of my favorites is when they were at, there was zero communication. They had torn those two apart, and Catherine made her way to the steps of a brownstone in Brooklyn that was next door to where India was living without knowing. And just that bond that was so strong, that was so unbreakable between them. And when Catherine told the story and India told it too, and we were there, it made us feel like we're on the right track here, and this is something that needs to be done. And we've tapped into something very, very real and very profound. And we're just going to do our best in getting it right.
I had to pause it and walk away for a second when that happened. I was like,
did you?
Yeah, I had to. And actually my husband was sitting there like doing work, and I was watching it, and he was like, what's wrong? And I told him about it, and he's sort of familiar with the story, and he was like, oh, holy shit. Like so yeah, that was a really incredible moment in the series. I feel like we could just talk forever about that.
I know. Sorry.
There's so much. But maybe we should end it there. Thank you so much for your time and your work. I don't want to speak for Megan, but obviously
oh gosh, we love your work.
Yeah, we love it so much. It's so
really
so well
important.
done.
It's a really important thing. So
yeah. So thank you so much again, and we hope you stay safe and stay sane and have a good rest of your day, I guess.
Thank you both. Can't wait to see what comes of this.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Talk soon.